care of it. All right, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Vila. I am a practicing pagan Wiccan druid. I have been in the South Jersey pagan community for about 25 years. I am a outgoing officer and senior member of Red Oak Grove, which is our local ADF Druid Grove. I'm also in dedicant training in a traditional Wiccan group and a Sabbath attendee of Hands of Change.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I'm a lot. So, but I
That's
won't be a
okay.
lot because right now this is a conversational space actually that we're about to open up. So try to be a little less.
It'll be a sharing moment.
Yes.
And I'm Inhedu Inanna of Hands of Change Coven. I am a Sumerian reconstructionist. I am a hospital palliative care social worker, an end-of-life doula or death midwife, and a psychopomp. So I spend most of my day in the face of and thinking about death. So I'm actually really excited that Vila had this great idea to offer a death cafe today. Has anybody ever been to a death cafe or sometimes called a death salon before?
Or even heard of this movement because it's fairly new. It's been the last like 15 years, but I mean,
So
it takes a long time to catch on.
Right, it did. So, the first death cafe was in 2004. And this was by a Swiss sociologist who started this as part of the death positivity movement, which we attribute to a social worker, Henry Fusco Weiss, who in 2003 began his work. And he has actually founded Indela, which is the International End-of-Life Doula Association. In 2011, Caitlin Doherty, who is a mortician, and she's very much out there online. She's got blogs, she's got websites, she's got fan pages even that who knows if she knows about. She's been really monumental in bringing the death positivity movement to light even more. You can find her work on it is the orderofthegooddeath.org.
Can we talk about what death positivity, what we mean by that?
Sure, yes. So what is death positivity? Why did all these people get together in people's homes or coffee houses and start to talk about death? Well, I think because a lot of people, I'm going to guess that you, since you're here, are not just curious about death itself, but there's a feeling with a lot of our societal norms that the way we handle death, the way we think about death, the way we experience death is not really normal. There's something that feels very antithetical to what we feel would be the most normal thing for the most natural part of life, which is death.
And I'd like to add to that different cultures throughout time, throughout place, handle death very differently, both in terms of grieving, in terms of how they physically handle the death process. And so there's a lot there. There's also a lot in terms of just the concept. And there's also about, is it okay to talk about death? Allie, as she said, spends her a lot of time immersed really with death. And do you find it at times hard for people? Like, if you tell people what you do you find that they are really interested, or do you find that they don't want to talk about it? What kind of reactions do you get?
So for me, I think I find most people are interested about it. Mm-hmm. Since I am in a hospital, I have sort of a different slant on the people I see because they're in crisis mode. I do get a lot of people that even as they're dying, there's a lot of denial from patients and family members. Mm-hmm. And culturally, there are some cultures, you find especially in some of our Asian cultures, it is considered still taboo to talk about death. So some people who are sick, they don't want to talk about it because it will invite bad spirits who will bring bad luck.
And I think I think there's some of that maybe less cultural, more superstitious among like just the Western American culture. Like, I have family members that are like, yeah, don't talk about that, and it's not necessarily a specific culture. It's sort of just Western European
And that
descended American.
Partially, I'm going to gather to guess, could be partly because of the way we deal with death, which is
I
at
think
a
so.
few arms lengths away.
I
We do
really
not deal with that.
I really think we have distanced ourselves from death, and that creates a not talking about death.
So why don't we start real quick? We'll just mention why we think, here in our modern day, at a festival glorifying ancient Samaria, are we talking about a movement that took place about 20 years ago? Why do we think this fits? What do you think? Why are we here?
Well, partly because, Inanna or Ishtar's main story is a descent into the underworld. So in a way, this whole festival is about death. Mm-hmm. And it's also about regeneration, which is our theme this year. So when I actually stumbled upon a death cafe at a festival I was at, as we were planning Ishtarfest, and I was like, this could really fit, because there is the way the ancient Sumerians and ancient Babylonians dealt with death versus the way we deal with death now. And then there's also, the whole story that we're basing this weekend on is really about a descent into the underworld. So I thought, death, the topic of death really does fit within what we're looking at here. And this would be a really cool opportunity to put a little bit of a twist on a death cafe, but also to bring the death cafe movement to a new space. So works both ways.
Last night we had Ishtarbucks Cafe, or no, I'm sorry, it was during the day. We had Ishtarbucks Cafe. So today we could really say is Arishka Gul's Death Cafe.
Yeah.
So I'd love to open it up and have everybody maybe talk about, why are you here? What's your interests? What are your feelings on death?
When you saw this title, what made you say, I'm going to zoom in?
Ladies, we got a request for names and resources into the chat, if you could, the things that you were mentioning in the beginning.
Oh, sure. You got it. You guys talk, I'll type. Just remember to unmute. Don't be shy.
You want me to pick one of you? Please don't make me be mean.
I'm here because.
No? Okay, Mercy, go ahead.
Oh, okay. The concept of what kind of rituals and taboos do we have around it, especially I sense a division between family members and immediate loved ones versus caretakers, because my partner is working in healthcare, and the population she works with, inherently she has to face the concept of getting close attachments with her patients and then having them pass, and she has not a lot of time to grieve them before she's reassigned to a new patient. And that kind of tension of how do you express your grief and your love for somebody when you're not family, but also you're expected to have this professionalism of moving on quickly. And so it's been definitely, especially in the past year, something that is increasingly, you have to pay attention to it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Allie can probably speak better to this than I can, but I will say that I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I have worked with a lot of healthcare professionals as clients, and that is really a tough thing. I mean, that's the burnout is real, and I myself burned out as the caretaker of the caretakers and had to take some time off, because there was a point where it was like I wasn't able to effectively really, sorry, keep the mirror is so confusing. There was a point where I was like, what do you say to people who are just seeing people die day in and day out and they can't cope with it? And they want an answer, you know, and I'm supposed to be the person with the answer, and all I can offer is support. And so that is really, really hard. And it's awesome that you want to explore this topic so you can support your partner better and for yourself, I'm sure. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing that.
And I think also there's a difference too with when we're talking about the healthcare workers and the pandemic, which has been something that none of us have ever seen in our lifetimes, right?
Yeah.
I think in general, it's not so much that there's so much death, save for maybe the people who are in like the ED or in the ICU, because they're so driven to save, to save, to save, to save. There are many of them that they struggle to just let go of, you know, a stage 4 heart failure. I think with this especially it's the manner in which the death has arrived. You know, the isolation, the pain and the fear, and just, you know, being an empath, walking in that space, you could feel it. It was so thick. It was so palpable. So I think there's that too. We can accept that it's natural. And you got people who work in neonatal ICUs. I don't know how they deal with their work, you know. So I think the manner and the energy surrounding the death, and then also what we do with that death moving forward. What rituals do we have to normalize it, to play a part of it, to keep that spirit alive, to keep that connection with someone whose physical form is now gone? And that could be a whole other topic we could talk about for hours, probably. Patricia, I see you're unmuted, so I'm going to come for you. What made you come into the cafe today?
I have been studying Slavic lore, but basically going back into the Neolithic, and I see a commonality with Babylonian beliefs. And I just wanted to get a little bit more grasp of how they had, you know, coped with death and so forth. Because what I see in the Slavic is that it was much more a circular thing. People were, you know, comforted by the fact that they would be reincarnated, that their spirit would go on. And then I saw this shift when linear religions came along, where you don't exist until you're born, then you're here on this earth for this infinitesimal amount of time, and then you go to heaven forever and hell forever. So death became a really scary thing, because, you know, you're like gambling everything, right? On which way you're gonna go.
Right.
So it's definitely a totally different mindset between that and, okay, we're done this round, see you next time. You know, not that the people around you aren't going to miss you, but that the person dying is not as afraid of the experience, I guess.
You know, at least from the texts that we have and have translated from Sumer, you know, at first the depiction of the underworld seems so grim, right? We're very much like anybody who practices, you know, Greek pantheons. It's the underworld is dark, it's shadowy. You eat mud and ash. Your goddess is this fierce lion-headed monster, right? It sounds so garish. And it doesn't bother me though as a Sumerian reconstructionist, because look, I think as a species, we've all evolved. I mean, we have a long way to go, but we've all evolved, I think, spiritually over the millennia. You've got more and more people who believe in spirit as energy in things like whether it's reincarnation or we're going to another plane. What I appreciate about the Sumerian tradition is, and like most traditions, you all go to the same place, you know, you're not getting spanked for eternity because you did something that felt really good at the time, for example. But for me too, when working with Arishka doll, I find she needs to be that lion mama, because she fiercely protects these souls who have been through so much trauma. You know, much like with birth, there's a destruction before the soul moves, right? Destruction of the body before birth, the destruction of the body is needed for death. There's a lot of trauma in those souls, and she protects and loves these energies.
I also think, there's cultural context here too, right? And some of it is time and some of it is place. I can remember going back to this, possibly it was my high school world civ class, like talking about comparing the Sumerian view of the afterlife versus the Egyptians. And, the Sumerian people, like, they worked hard every day. They did not have it easy, right? And so their view of the underworld was really this place of like restfulness. They didn't have to work for their food. They were protected. And so it sounds grim to us with our iPads and our iPhones and our tablets, but consider the possibility that to an ancient Sumerian, it just sounded restful.
It might be good to just sleep in the shade of the house of the dead.
Yeah.
And they have a concept of reincarnation, because with the Slavs, you saw the sun, and the sun rose in the morning in the east, and it went through the sky, and it set in the west, and it set in the ocean, it set in the water, and then it traveled through a watery underworld and came back up again. And that's exactly how they saw the death and rebirth, because when you give birth, you got this huge gush of water, right? So it's this, and all the springs come up from under the ground. So that's where the spirit world is, and you come back around again. Did the Babylonians have that? I mean,
well, I'll speak specifically to the Sumerians. There is no text that I know of that has yet been translated, because there are still many texts that we have not translated that have been found.
And who knows what we have not found.
Right.
right.
But of the ones that are found, I know of none that speak to a mortal soul being reincarnated. The gods, however, you have in their deity form and then in the land. So such as the best example, Inanna's descent and her ascension, the death and rebirth, which you have also triggering the death and rebirth of the land, the changing of the seasons,
right?
Your flow and your Darth, but not for people. Not that we have yet. Who knows? I think it would be fascinating to discover if we have, but we believe we were molded, by the gods from clay. There's nothing that talks about the spirit of the human or animal.
But there's nothing that contradicts it either.
There is nothing that contradicts it. You're right. And most religions at that time also didn't talk about that. But look how many people today have a belief that, we've had past lives or that we go on.
But again, that cultural context, we know how old the earth is. We know how old humans are. They wouldn't have had that historical view.
Right. They were kind of starting from the beginning.
They were
and working on this concept.
Right. So
Those are big concepts.
perhaps that's, they were inventing religion, so we've had a long way and a long way to go, it's sad. So let's
It feels like that, but we have the cultural context of more scientific knowledge, then also in our current context is used as another tool to distance ourselves. Like, we're the rational, we're the non-superstitious, we're the non-religious, we're the scientific, but also that is giving us more layers to deny the closeness we have to death.
I agree that science is a double-edged sword when it comes to spirituality. It's often, I was actually just listening to an audiobook this morning talking about how science can be used to divorce spirituality from the equation. And that's an excellent point. Thank you.
However, and I'm going to counter that a little bit. If you were to take a poll of people who work in healthcare, you will find that probably most of them have had some kind of experience. From as surface as once a dying person starts seeing people in the room that nobody else sees, which is 99% of the time, they are dead within 48 hours typically of that sighting. Most people believe that someone has to come from the other side to help you cross over. Spoken with lots and lots of families. My own family has that belief. You will have people that go in the room to check on the patient, say hello to the visiting family member in the chair, talk to the patient, turn around. Where's that person? I can't tell you how many times, and not just to me, but people that I work with, that things like that happen all the time, or just the feeling in the air before somebody makes that transition out of body. So yes, we have science. I'm one of those people that believes they have to go hand in hand, and it makes you all the better. But you do see, I think, people, yes, growing in scientific manners, but I also see us more broad in what we accept as our personal spirituality. Arthur, I'm gonna call on you. Good morning.
Morning.
What brings you into the Reshka Girls Cafe today?
It was on the schedule.
It was, you win.
But I'm very glad. I'm very glad that it's being offered, because I think that our society is 95% in denial of death being a natural part of personal evolution and personal experience.
Yep, I agree with you. You want to pick someone? Oh, Lindsay's raising her hand.
Okay, Lindsay.
You looked
Yeah,
beautiful last night, by the way, Lindsay.
oh, thank you. I'm glad to come to this. We have death cafes in London where I live. I haven't felt drawn to go to them because there has been no pagan context, and I've bad experience. I used to be director of an organization that supported and campaigned for older LGBT people. And I've got bad experiences of that, of older people who are atheist and are religious arguing with each other.
Yeah.
There have been, I've always tried to moderate it, and I wasn't out as a pagan because of my role as director, but some of the death cafes I've been thinking of going to have been in that context of older LGBT death cafes, and I've avoided them because of I didn't want to experience that again. What I experienced it wasn't in a death cafe, but it was about religion generally. So and I know some very campaigning atheists who are very angry in the older LGBT community. You can see why they're angry about Christianity, really, and to some extent Islam as well. But anyway, it's I'm really glad to be here. Enough of all that. I used to be a homeopath. I've worked with dying people, and my mum is nearly 100, and she has early dementia, and she lives in her own flat, cooks her own food, and I spend 2 days a week with her. But her memory is going, and it is frightening, and I feel like, because if she was going to be happy to go in a care home, it wouldn't be a problem, but she's terrified of it and terrified of losing her independence. And I feel like death and her dementia are racing each other, and I really pray for her to have a good death, whatever that is going to be for her. I can't determine that, but I want it to be what is right for her. So
have you asked her what a good death looks like for her?
I sort of know, actually. I think she would like to die in her sleep. She's a devout Christian. She believes that she will I don't know if she believes she'll go to heaven straight away or sleep until Judgment Day. I haven't asked her that. Or whether she thinks she'll be with Jesus straight away. I don't know, but she has faith, you know? So I can guess what it is. But what I mean is when I pray, if I'm praying for a good death in her eyes, if you see what I mean, rather than in mine.
Mhm. Of course. Yep.
Yeah, because that's how it should be. So there's that. And my father died a long time ago. Well, I don't know, but I think 25 years ago. And when I'm just saying this because of what people have said about someone coming to help you over.
Mhm.
My father was dying in a hospital ward, and he was on a main ward with lots of people because there wasn't a single room for him. And he was shouting all the time one name over and over, Harold, Harold. And we have no Harold in our family, but when he was in the RAF in the Second World War, he had a friend called Harold, and Harold died not in the war, but after the war. He died from some illness in the 50s. And I have this idea that maybe when my father and Harold were in the RAF sometime, they said, what if we get killed? Although he wasn't on very active service, he was in the Bahamas teaching people how to take photographs on reconnaissance flights. So he was a sergeant instructor teaching photography, but they could have got bombed or something. So I think they might have talked about it. And who knows, maybe they said to each other, well, if I die first, I'll come for you and help you, or something like that. You never know what, because he's never spoken about Harold ever. But he was calling that name over and over and over. Of course, being queer, I thought, oh my God, maybe Harold was his lover, but I don't think that's likely.
Who knows?
I think it's very unlikely. But yeah, but I think they may have had a very strong friendship bond. And that's
When you
all,
said
the
it,
only
the
way I
army
can
resonates.
it's the only way I can interpret it. And I'm very glad because my father had no religion and he was quite scared of dying. And I feel I let him down by not talking about it with him enough. But it was quite difficult to do. In
You know, everybody's on their own journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful.
I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here. Morning, Amy.
I'm here, I saw it on the schedule and I realized last night I'm really more of a morning person. So the kind of camera on, social stuff, I'm more up for it in the morning. I actually thought it would be more about Sumerian and Babylonian death, burial practices and stuff, which interests me. But I really appreciate learning about death cafes. I didn't know that was a thing. And my parents are in their late 80s. So they're living on their own in their house, but we're kind of like thinking about what's ahead. And so far we've just kind of talked about like funeral preferences for them, like music and people and how they want to be remembered and stuff. But I really like this question, like what would a good death be? What would it look like for you?
Beautiful question.
Yeah. So I don't know, do you have any more questions like that? I mean, that's a pretty...
Like questions that you would ask your parents?
Yeah.
Or anyone who was, maybe terminal.
Yeah. I mean, so what does a good death look like to you? How do you see, or how would you like to see those final days or hours play out? How do you want to be remembered? So legacy work is really important. Some people like to write letters. Here in New Jersey, we have a woman that offers a free service. She does mini documentaries with people who are terminal.
Wow.
And she edits them. You don't hear her voice. It's just the person talking. She'll set music or photos to it. And after the person has died, she gives that to the families. I think she gives like 2 USB drives or something. People write cookbooks or will do their thumb or fingerprints, and you can put them under those glass marbles and shellac them. Hand molds. So you can have a mold of you holding your mother's hand, you know. There is a hospice company that plants 10 trees in a national park after you die. There are groups that will take their favorite clothing and stitch a teddy bear out of it for maybe the grandchild.
Mhm.
There's so many different things. They could put together, they could make a CD of all their favorite songs or songs that they think of when they think of the family members and give that to them, have that handed out after their death.
Yeah,
There's
they're beautiful
many
ideas. Wow.
And I highly recommend, if anybody, you know, get an end of life doula working, because that's what they are there to do, to help find out what's important to the person and kind of structure for them. What do you want to have done? What projects do you want to work on that we can do beforehand? And that, for the people that are open to it, it does give a sense of continuity, of completion, of acceptance.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how do you open a conversation and what can you do to make it the most comfortable as possible when you're approaching talking to a loved one about death? Because that can be really,
It can.
really, you know,
So
a taboo topic, like we said.
right. You know, there's not one blanket statement because
Sure.
everyone will deal with it differently, but it might be sometimes listening for cues, because some people will start mentioning little things, you know,
Drop
oh,
in.
when I'm gone, or that's yours when I'm dead, you know, and it might just be like, you know, Mom, Dad, I know this is strange, but you know, we never really talked about that. I know it's uncomfortable, but it's important for me to know what is important to you so that I can carry out your wishes. And most people might say, oh, you know what I want. No, I honestly really don't. And I'm really worried that I would make a bad choice for you. Something like that.
As a therapist, I'm a big fan of what you just said. We call it the verbal pillow, which is where you kind of just lay it out on the table and say, yeah, this is uncomfortable. It's important, and here's why. And that kind of gives a person a cushion before you launch into, what are your final wishes? Because that's a big thing. A person needs a pillow to land on when they hear that question, or they're gonna not land so softly.
And the open-ended questions.
Right, and the open-ended questions, because and it's also okay to say, you know, if I had to plan it, it's going to be what I want. I want it to be what you want, because it's yours. It's your experience, you know. So I think that's really, really good advice, and really, I mean, that's how I would want someone to approach me.
And there's probably lots of places online that you can find little scripts and ideas too. So like thedeathcafe.com, I think inelda.org, they do have a resource link in there too, which I think is open to the public. So they talk about legacy work ideas, advanced care planning, things like that. The Order of the Good Death probably has something on there too. They also do a lot of like green burial services and where you can find those. There's lots out there.
Amy brought up the practices of ancient Sumerians.
Oh, yes.
So maybe
let's go back to
I'd like to kind of compare and contrast that with the modern American funeral
Sure.
industry.
Okay.
You probably know better the ancient Sumerian part. Well, you probably know both better, but let's start with the ancient Sumerians.
Gonna make me blush. Well, what we have, or at least what I can speak to may not be very much, but we see with traditional sort of, you could say ancestor worship, though I don't believe that they would consider ancestor worship in ancient Sumer.
More like veneration.
But you're still feeding your dead. You're still caring for the dead. So leaving offerings, the food at the grave site, pouring water out for them, the constant prayers for them.
I'm assuming the family prepared the body for burial.
Most definitely, most definitely. I mean, and that is how it has been
In most
time
cultures,
immemorable until
the modern American funeral industry,
somebody made money
which
off
is
of it.
post-Victorian. So it would have been what, mid 1900s, mid 20th century, probably.
So the
should have called it
Civil
the
War really gave a big nod to not only the advances with embalming,
Yeah.
but because they had that tool to use, it then gave growth to the funerary industry. Because so many soldiers were being killed and having to be stored or shipped or transported for days. They wanted to have this beautiful memory picture.
Yeah.
So when they had advances in embalming, that is where it really took off. You've probably heard, Abraham Lincoln was our first president to ever be embalmed because his body was on tour via train after his assassination.
Which still seems like we're closer to death than we are today. It seems like we get further and further from that. Now, when we have, most people don't even have, well, not most people, but a lot of people don't have any viewing of body at all.
True.
So it seems like with each step of sort of modernization, I'll say, we get further from it.
And a lot of that is our societal structure too. So in ancient Sumer, much like up until, more modern times, you would have larger families. You would need larger families because you're responsible for the land, and there wasn't a whole lot of contraception. But you had families were larger, and families typically lived under the same roof or very close together. So when a person was ill, there were no hospitals. You might have a medicine person, someone who was knowledgeable in herbs and natural healing that would come and try to give comfort, but the family was caring for that person. And when they died, that family cared for that body.
And it wasn't one or two people when we say the family,
Right.
like now the family is often, a couple in a household
Right.
with kids.
Right.
maybe
So
one
back
other
then you might
relative.
have multiple generations. Typically in most cultures that work went to the women. We bring them in, we take them out. I don't know. But
We're of the earth.
But part of the plus though is you had children seeing the dying process. You had children experiencing death, and children were hands-on a part of that memoriam piece. And so death was very normal. It was very natural. And also when you live so close to the land, death comes to dinner with you almost every night. If you didn't get certain work done before the winter or the storm, if you didn't prepare for that flood, death was there. It was a constant part. Look at, I'm going to skip ahead, Renaissance times, you've probably seen lots of paintings of somebody in a library or a study with a human skull. That wasn't just because it was cool. It was actually, it was a practice that you had that skull because you were faced with your mortality every day. You want to get that project done? You want to do something with your life? Don't waste time. You are mortal.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I think it was Patricia, you talked about seeing circles. Very nice. I love it. Thank you. When you talked about circles, versus linear, right? And when you're living on the land and you're living in that sort of agricultural society, it's very much cycles, because you know what else you see this in your face all the time? Birth. So you see birth and you see death. You're going to see that with the animals, your livestock. You're going to see it with your plants, your crops. And you're going to see it with the people that you share your community with.
We've got about 15 minutes left. And so I know we've got 4 people on, and I just want to give them a chance if they want to talk a little bit about any of this. So I'll call everybody, and if you want to talk, it's great. If not, that is cool too.
Okay, you're welcome to type pass or something like that in the chat, or if you want to type what you have to say in the chat, we will then read it.
Okay. And there is a question in the chat from Amy. Have you come across traditions of burying the dead under the floor of the home in Sumer? Can't remember where I read that and don't know much about that. Yeah, that's really fascinating. I have heard it's like hinting that it's in the house. I know that there are some other traditions and cultures that have buried under the actual home. But in Sumer, we also have grave sites. So I would love to actually look into that more to find out, was it more of a financial obligation? Could they not afford maybe to bury in the cemetery?
So the place where they were doing the burials under the house was more in Anatolia and Çatalhöyük. So that's not down in Sumeria. And there, my understanding from the research I've done in that is that's not necessarily, I mean, there is some kind of economic cost because multi-generational usage of that space. But if you want to look into that, that's really up more in the Anatolian area, that really fascinating archaeological records of that.
Thank you for that. And Patricia writes, that's common Slavic, especially with babies, so that they would be reborn into the family. Ooh, keep them close, keep that energy connection close. All right, I'm going to bounce over to Babsy. Is there anything that you want to add or talk about for a couple minutes? And if not, that's fine. Babsy may not be there. Okay. Okay, we can come back if you're on. Clove, are you around, love? She might just be prepared for the next one.
I'm here.
Hi. Hi, dear. Anything you want to add to our caffeinated conversation?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Give me a few minutes maybe to get my head around it.
No problem. I'll move down the row. Jeffrey, good morning. Are you there?
Morning.
Good morning.
Hello.
I don't specifically have anything to add. Like several other people, I had come in kind of looking for the Mesopotamian, Babylonian, historical context. But now knowing that, death cafes and this deeper conversation, is a ongoing available resource. It's something I'm definitely going to look into for my personal ministry.
Cool.
Good. I mean, it is wonderful with ministry work. It goes so well.
I think next year, Mercy and Amy and Patricia should host the next Death Cafe and talk more about those traditions that they have information of or would like to find more of.
I'll take you up on that. Dust off the old classics degree.
Awesome.
Okay,
Love it.
excellent. Love it.
Okay.
And we'd love to make a tradition too. That's another thing we love. That's our legacy work.
Right,
right.
Okay, Clove's got her hands up, and then we'll move over to Will and see if he's got anything.
So I just wanted to say to people, my mom had lupus, and when I was in middle school, she went into a coma for 3 days and came back. And I swear that she had made, some pact with the gods that said that she wouldn't abandon me. And then she did end up passing away when I was 21. But I just want to put out there, I mean, and we knew that she had lupus, but she hadn't made a will since, I don't know, like maybe even before I was born, and it was written on a piece of paper. So like my recommendation to people out there is just make sure that your paperwork is up to date.
Yes, do your loved ones a favor. Take care of your stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Will, hi, good morning.
Morning. Let's see, I am another of those who are looking more for historical background. And something I would say is that, I never cease to be nonplussed at the way people nowadays avoid the D word itself.
Mhm.
You know, like if you don't see the snort, it won't hurt you. And, you know, I find that, you know, eschewing died instead in favor of past or passing. So it's something which irritates me a lot.
That's a really, really good point. I think that's on the Death Cafe website. I think there's an essay, possibly. I read it somewhere, and I want to say it was the Death Cafe website about all the euphemisms around death. You know, we say passed over, crossed over,
Sleeping,
yeah,
gone to their great reward.
and that comes up when you're explaining death to children, and how with kids, when you are first explaining death to them, how important it is to actually use the word death.
Yes.
You know, don't tell kids, people, grandma went to sleep.
Because now they're freaking out. Oh my God, I'm going to go to sleep and die.
Right.
You know,
Grandma went to sleep forever. Well, no, don't say that, because then they're never going to go to sleep again. You know, don't say she crossed over. They'll never cross the street. Okay, maybe it's just my kids with their anxiety, but you know, there is a very important thing. Words have power, and the word death has a lot of power. And I really appreciate you bringing that up, Will, because I think that's a really important point. And I don't know much about the ancient Sumerian language, but I'm guessing they did not talk about death in euphemisms all the time.
it was in your face 24/7.
Right, exactly.
I wish we had 2 hours. Okay, so Lindsay just put into the chat, in Sumer, people would be more likely to die young in childbirth or battle or unexpectedly from infection or sudden illness. Though this can happen, and I was shocked a few years ago when I was hospitalized with sepsis, but I am 74 and I have to think about death anyway. I have had a mild attack, for instance, but the thing that I have the opportunity for is sorting things out in my house. I have so many collections and precious things, many of pagan significance, plus textile work I have created. I want to make sure I get rid of the clutter and make a very detailed will, passing on my possessions and their meaning, especially pagan items I have made, also books. But I feel I need to document many of the things. I am thinking of creating a spiritual inventory of items that can be passed on to pagan friends.
That's a beautiful idea.
So I feel like we enticed you out here with history, but now we're telling you to get your paperwork in order. So fill out an advance directive, talk with your friends, your loved ones, tell them what you want, tell them what's important to you.
And age doesn't matter here either.
No.
This is not a topic for the elderly or for those of us with elderly relatives, because, you know, anything can happen at any time, and it's not about doom and gloom. It's about just reality.
I've had an advance directive for 7-8 years now.
Yeah.
And then Amy writes, I love Roz Chast's graphic memoir. Can't we talk about something more pleasant? I'm trying to care for and talk with her parents about dying when they don't want to talk about it. Ooh,
Thanks for
that's
the recommendation.
that sounds cool. I'm gonna have to remember that one.
Yeah.
Can't we talk about something?
I'll share with you, my mother passed away when I was 9. And so I've been telling people for a long time, hey, my mother died when I was a kid. And to this day, people don't know what to say to me. But like, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, why?
I know, you
like,
can do
I'm 40. Like, I happened 31 years ago. Like, it's awful. I grew up without a mom. Yeah, it sucks. It sucked. It sucks still. I'm still messed up over it. Like, yeah, but like,
Hey, trauma, my dad at 5. Yeah.
right, you know, so you know what it's like to grow up as a child knowing about death in this culture where people don't like to talk about death, and you're a kid who needs to talk about death because you had death
And
in
it
your
wasn't
family.
explained. There wasn't like a continuance of the relationship. There wasn't a carry on. I would come home from kindergarten and show my father's urn, like the coloring that I did in school. And so that kind of freaked my mom out. So instead of talking to me, she put his urn in a mausoleum. And we're still to this day trying to get her, like, can we just please take that out? We would really like to do something more creative with his ashes. My sister and I tried to break in. That was a little scary. I don't recommend it. talk with people. Change starts with us, right? So talk to your friends, talk to your loved ones. You might be that creep who talks about death all the time. That's okay.
I mean, I got a little lucky because my dad remarried, and it was definitely like Sandy never existed, you know. My grandma, you know, was able to share a lot with me, and she's now 90, so that's scary, but she was able to share a lot of memories and kind of keep my mom alive. She kept the pictures, and even my dad's mother insisted on keeping my mom's picture up and would not do the whole "she never existed" thing. So I was lucky in some respects, but there was still a lot of, we didn't talk about the actual death. We talked about the memories before she got sick, and that was hard because I don't remember those.
Mercy puts in the chat, there's that kid's novel, Every Little Bird That Sings by Deborah Wiles. I read it when I was 9, and it was so impactful that I turned to it when I was 15 and grieving my grandmother. It gave me a model for finding my own personalized way of processing. Yes, there's a plethora of children's books out there nowadays, even if it's not specifically death, you know, separation. So like the Invisible String, and it comes with a workbook. I'm probably going to say this backwards, but I think it's Sun Kisses and Moon Hugs or something like that, which is gorgeous. There's tons, and I think those are always good to have on hand. You know, if you have children in your family, the first deaths that they are going to experience typically are either an elderly family member or the family pet. So it's good to be able to keep them part of that, make them part of the traditions. My oldest son gave our cat a bath with me after she died, and we laid her out on the hearth, and he had his peanut butter and jelly sandwich next to her and read her a book before we went to the pet funeral home. You know, keep them part of it.
Yeah.
We have a few minutes left.
It's like Melissa joined, and I know Uncle Gypsy is the next workshop. So
Yes, we have the next workshop starting, but we do see yes, James and Melissa, if there's anything you guys want to add to this topic, please feel free. Otherwise, we'll just keep it open for any chit chat before we start the next one. And this has been a great convo. I'm already looking forward to next year when these 3 ladies do it.
I am very much looking forward to that. And we didn't talk about Ereshkigal much specifically. So do you want to maybe end on that note, talking about
Sure. So there is a great book that I recommend to everyone called Journey to the Dark Goddess. That is by Jane Meredith. It is all about the descent. She takes you on a descent ritual, but she builds up into it. So you will have some practice runs, things like learning how to put your ear to the great below, listening for Ereshkigal, the goddess of death, who is our shadow self, listening to that voice that we sometimes don't want to hear, that we push down. She will take you through building mandalas and doing the ritual. Book info, yes, it is Journey to the Dark Goddess by Jane Meredith. And I just sent that to Helenana. Hold on. It's hard to talk.
It is really, it's a lot. I'm curious, is
I
anybody
will
else?
copy and paste it.
I got it, babe. I'm doing it right
Has
now.
anybody else worked Ereshkigal or Goddess of Death that they have had personal experience with?
Well, in this book, it talks heavily about how Ereshkigal is the one that forces the rebirth. And she actually likens it to a lot of old fairy tales, which is pretty cool. One was like Snow White and the queen that we see as the evil queen. But if it weren't for her and causing this death, you wouldn't see that change in the little princess maiden victim who then becomes stronger woman. So there's so many ways that you can look towards, you know, death practices, our practices today, and where we are with our regeneration after nearly 2 years of so much death.
Yeah, that's another reason that we decided to do this, of course, is the timeliness of this topic. I mean, it's just, we talked about how it was in the face of ancient Sumerians and ancient Babylonians, and really just up until probably post-Civil War times when the modern funeral industry started. But death is back in our face
In a big way.
in a big way.
We really need more than an hour to talk about something like this, but I hope it got everybody thinking. It sounds like, Amy, you had a question. Well, how do you talk about? So I hope that gave you something. Mercy's going to break out some more research, so that's cool. I want to thank everybody.
Yes, thank you all for participating, for coming and dealing with a topic that potentially is a real mood
triggering.
killer. See, we can even make puns, bad puns, but puns nonetheless.
You need dark humor. You
Yeah.
won't survive.
Exactly.
Any-
See what you did there.
Oh, shit. Once a death worker, always a death worker. Any final questions or comments? And then I'm gonna switch it back over to Helenana for the next segment. Going once, going twice. Thank you, Vila. This was a
Thank
great idea. I
you.
had a lot of fun. I hope you guys did too. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Bye.